Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're sitting at your desk right now, just staring blankly at this massive, totally disorganized stack of research articles, half-highlighted PDFs, and, scattered sticky notes everywhere, you might be feeling an intense wave of panic creeping in. And honestly, you're definitely not alone. The sheer volume of information can literally paralyze even the most experienced writers. So today we're going to tackle that exact massive pain point, dealing with a seemingly insurmountable pile of disparate sources. We're going to give you a highly structured blueprint to kind of tame that chaos, extract the real value, and transform all that overwhelming data into a cohesive, compelling narrative. Let's get into it.
Here's our step-by-step roadmap for today. We're going to cover the boss battle of research, summary versus true synthesis, avoiding the laundry list, building a synthesis matrix, finding the research gap, and finally, crafting your final narrative. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the boss battle of research. The literature review is pretty much universally acknowledged as the absolute boss battle of university research. Why? Well, because it's this critical task that transitions you from simply being a student who just absorbs existing knowledge into a true researcher who actually produces new knowledge. But it's also the exact chapter that drives people to sleepless nights and terrible writer's block. So I want to challenge your current approach right out of the gate. Staring at a stack of PDFs, reading one, jotting down what it says, and then simply moving to the next is a massive trap. Ask yourself honestly right now, when you look at your sources, are you just summarizing them or are you actually synthesizing them? There's a profound difference, and understanding that difference is absolutely crucial to mastering your research. Which brings us to Section 2, summary versus true synthesis. To pull ourselves out of that summary trap, we have to undergo a complete paradigm shift. We literally have to fundamentally change how we interact with our sources, moving from, passive consumption to active critical engagement. Think of it as a clear distinction between acting as a reporter versus acting as a thinker. A summary, that's just reporting. You take one source, shrink it down into your own words, and focus entirely on what that specific author said. It's kind of like writing a simple movie recap. Synthesis, on the other hand, elevates you to the role of the thinker. You're combining multiple sources, focusing on your own analysis, and figuring out exactly how these completely disparate ideas connect. Think of your sources like guests at a dinner party. You wouldn't just sit there and let them give isolated monologues one by one while everyone else eats in awkward silence, right? No way. You'd want to synthesize the room by forcing them into a lively cross-table discussion. You'd point out where author A passionately agrees with author B, or where author C just directly contradicts them both. Moving on to Section 3, avoiding the laundry list. Now, failing to create that dynamic cross-table discussion leads directly to one of the biggest grade-ruining mistakes you can make, the laundry list approach. The laundry list is that dreaded he said, she said format. It's essentially just taking a roll call of authors. Paragraph 1 is all about author A. Paragraph 2 is entirely about author B. You absolutely must avoid this. Instead, you need to step into the shoes of an academic detective. You got to actively question methodologies and really dig into the original texts. If you rely too heavily on secondary sources, meaning, you're just taking another author's word for what a previous study found, you risk passing on historical errors. Take the famous spinach myth, for example. Because of a super simple 19th century calculation error where a decimal point was placed in the wrong spot, an entire generation of secondary sources blindly repeated that spinach was this miracle source of iron. It created a myth that lasted for decades. To avoid doing that, you just can't accept findings as absolute facts. Did that groundbreaking study actually test a massive population, or was it just like 10 people? Dig deeper, read the fine print, and hey, don't forget to include gray literature too, like white papers and industry reports. It really helps you stay grounded in the real world rather than just getting stuck in the ivory tower. Okay, let's look at Section 4, building a synthesis matrix. So how in the world do we actually avoid these pitfalls without losing our minds? Well, we are going to introduce an incredibly powerful tool for organizing your sources. Instead of organizing by author, we're going to organize by theme. By plotting your authors on the left-hand side of a grid and the major themes or topics along the top, you completely transform chaotic data into a cohesive, workable structure. It's a real game changer. The golden rule here, and if you write down one thing today, make it this, is that you read your articles and take notes vertically, down the column for each source. But when it's finally time to actually write your paper, you read horizontally across the rows. This guarantees that your paragraphs are built around central themes and ideas, seamlessly blending multiple perspectives, rather than just painfully listing what individual authors said one after the other. Setting this up in a spreadsheet program like Excel actually forces a strict, essential consistency across your research. First, define your goal.
What exactly are you trying to achieve? Are you comparing methodologies, maybe evaluating differing results, or tracking a specific demographic? Second, choose your fields carefully based on that goal. Third, and honestly this is crucial, keep it simple. Start with just 6 to 8 columns. Adding 20 columns to try and capture every tiny detail, that's just going to create massive friction and slow your momentum to a complete crawl. A field might be as simple as sample size, core argument, or limitations. Finally, use filters. When you've got dozens of rows, the ability to instantly sort your data by, say, the year of publication or a specific finding is an absolute lifesaver. Take a look at this. Notice how breaking each study down into comparable components totally standardizes your data extraction. You might have columns for the methodology, the overarching field, or a really specific thematic focus. This setup makes your ultimate synthesis incredibly accurate. You aren't just blindly trusting your memory after reading 50 papers. Instead, you've essentially built a comprehensive bird's-eye view of your entire research landscape. Every single study is evaluated on the exact same metrics right there side by side. Now for Section 5, Finding the Research Gap. Once your matrix is beautifully populated, a really profound shift happens. You aren't just storing data anymore, you're actively using it to visually locate the missing puzzle pieces in your field. Your literature review must act as both a funnel and a bridge. Think of it visually for a second. It should funnel the reader from existing, broad, historical knowledge at the top, steadily narrowing down into the current, highly specific debates at the bottom. Then, once it's narrowed down, it has to act as a sturdy bridge, guiding the reader directly from those debates, across the chasm, and right into the specific gap that your own original research intends to fill. And how exactly do you find that elusive gap? You literally look straight at your matrix. If you notice that an entire column dedicated to a specific theme has very few notes, or, multiple sources leave a specific cell entirely blank, boom, you have visually identified a gap in the literature. Maybe you expected your sources to thoroughly cover a certain demographic or some specific technological application, but none of them actually did. That blank space in your matrix, that is exactly where your original research can live, thrive, and contribute something genuinely new to the academic conversation. Finally, Section 6, Crafting your final narrative. Now comes the really rewarding part. We take that beautifully organized matrix and we turn it into a compelling, tightly woven final product. Remember, we write across the rows of our matrix. To stitch different authors together under one thematic idea, you need the right glue. And that glue? Transition words. If sources agree, seamlessly blend them using words like similarly, likewise, or also. But if your matrix reveals a fierce debate between sources, you want to highlight that tension using words like conversely, however, or on the other hand. This simple but highly effective technique elevates your writing from a choppy, disjointed summary into a sophisticated, flowing synthesis that guides your reader effortlessly from one concept right to the next. What's truly fascinating here is that this skill isn't just reserved for academic papers. It actually has a massive, highly lucrative cross-disciplinary payoff. The exact same thematic organization and synthesis that you use to write a flawless literature review is the literal underlying pre-production process used by top creative agencies to storyboard Webby-winning explainer videos. Pretty wild, right? Just like a literature review, an explainer video synthesizes complex, heavy ideas, targets a very specific audience's pain points, and relies on a highly structured storyboard, which, if you really think about it, is essentially just a visual synthesis matrix. That matrix helps creators perfectly balance dense education with engaging entertainment, making sure the narrative never loses its way. Whether you're writing a rigorous academic chapter meant for a peer-reviewed journal or producing a dynamic visual narrative meant for thousands of viewers online, the core objective remains exactly the same. The goal is to lead the audience toward a satisfying aha moment where everything finally clicks, filling in that missing puzzle piece of their understanding. So armed with your new synthesis matrix, are you ready to stop acting as a passive reporter who merely summarizes data and start stepping up as the active thinker who creates that ultimate epiphany for your audience? The tools are right in front of you. Now go build your matrix.